Good morning, everyone. My name is Brandon Whitnable. I'm part of the marketing department here at Trimble. I want to thank you all for joining us for the webinar today. Just want to do a little quick housekeeping. Just so everyone is aware, you're going to be on mute during this webinar. So if you have questions, please chat them in. There is a question box that you'll see, and then our speaker will answer those questions as time allows. We are going to be recording the webinar today, and everyone will receive an email copy of this tomorrow. We are going to get started in about 5 minutes, so please stay on the line, and we're excited to present about our CDMA plans today. Good morning, everyone. I'm just giving a quick 2-minute warning. We'll get started here in about 2 minutes or so. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brandon Whitnable, and I'm part of the marketing department at Trimble. I want to thank everyone for joining us today for the webinar, What Your Fleet Needs to Know About 2G and 3G Network Sunsets. Today's session will be recorded and will be emailed to all attendees tomorrow afternoon. We'll be muted during this presentation, so if you have any questions, please chat them in the question box, and our presenter will answer them as time allows. We will leave time at the end for questions. As we get started, please allow me to introduce our speaker, John Binder. John is a Director of Wireless Operations at Trimble Transportation and has been with Trimble since 1997. Well, without further ado, John, can you take it away?
Well, thank you, Brandon, and appreciate all the attendees today, and in particular, the interest in technology and how connectivity drives the decisions your fleets will make, and along with the applications and integrations that support and allow you to have a successful operation. So again, thank you for attending. All right, we'll start with a little housekeeping. Sorry. Moment here. All right, my apologies there. Just understanding that today's conversations are protected by Safe Harbor. Brandy gave us some of the information already on the session details, so we'll move forward from this screen. And my name is John Binder, Director of Wireless Transportation here. Again, my apologies. All right. Myself again, the bad presenter here. My apologies there for some technical issues. Let's move forward from here. As Brandon said, I have been with Trimble since 1997. Before that, I was with Verizon and other predecessor wireless companies. We have a great background here and extensive history, particularly Trimble, in connectivity and what our customers require in order for a successful operation. So the topics, when and why carriers are repurposing networks for connectivity, how the sunset could impact your fleet, what to consider, what questions to ask when upgrading in-cab equipment, including questions to ask your mobility provider about the technologies in use. And then strategies to leverage the full capabilities of current networks, LTE, and when to expect 5G networks for transportation. So the evolution of wireless networks. There are nearly 21 billion connected devices in the world, and this number is projected to triple in the next 5 years. More and more devices require better and faster coverage, but also require more capacity. Wireless carriers continue to invest in 4G, long-term evolution, or LTE networks to make sure capacity and the coverage there is needed. Virtually every device, as we know, is connected now. Of course, transportation was an early adopter of connectivity, but more and more sensors, monitors, alerts, everything from in-home refrigerators, washers and dryers, things on the consumer side, but virtually every device is connected today, and that will continue to increase. So what do? We need to move over and replace the legacy 2 and 3G CDMA and GSM networks. So in order to invest in LTE and increasingly 5G, wireless carriers need to sunset existing older networks. We'll go through what the sunset process means here in a bit. U.S. carriers have been repurposing these CDMA and GSM networks for some years. Today we're specifically talking about the USA and North America, but 2G services for CDMA and GSM sunset in Mexico back in 2016. And in Canada in April of 2019. So we've got some history here, and we've seen how these will occur and how we move forward. So it's always about spectrum and capacity. And that means there's a limited amount of capacity or radio waves and spectrum to support the connections and the data calls and, of course, voice calls that occur over the wireless networks. And this is just a quick graphic that shows us, with the 4 major carriers in the U.S., how much spectrum they have available. Now, this isn't meant to indicate that there's anything inferior about their offering or the coverage, but just speaks to the capacity. You can see in this graphic that Verizon is in the worst position from a capacity perspective, and that should make us understand why they were the first to announce the CDMA sunsets in particular. Sprint and T-Mobile have completed a recent merger, but they are in the best position at the moment with spectrum and capacity on their networks. Again, this is not meant to indicate there's anything wrong with their network or anything inferior about it, just speaking to how much capacity they have to serve their subscribers and customers. So how does the sunset process occur? Again, we've seen this happen in Canada and Mexico, and now we get to experience it here in the U.S. as well. So the first point is there are overlapping cell site coverages removed. So if you picture your phone sitting on your desk perhaps today, it might be in view of anywhere from 5 to 10 different cell sites. The network decides which site has the best connection for your device and transmits to that particular cell. So the first step is to remove that overlapping coverage. That has largely already occurred. In fact, Verizon completed most of their overlapping cell site reductions in the summer of 2019. Once that's done, then channel capacity per cell site is reduced. So possibly to as little as a single channel per site. That capacity, of course, is migrated to LTE and increasingly 5G as well. Capital expenditures are reduced to maintenance levels, so there's no new features added to the network, and there's certainly not coverage expansion. And interestingly, if you were to look at a map, you would notice that coverage appears static. You wouldn't see the presentation of CDMA or GSM reduced in coverage, but we know that capacity is. So a good analogy here is our road, which should be meaningful to our transportation customers. So access versus reliability. So the reliability of older networks and devices that use them will start to degrade. You might think of it as an abandoned road. At first, you might still be able to access it and use it, but over time, the lack of maintenance, repair, make it virtually impossible to use. So the road is still there, but increasingly difficult to use. It's a good analogy for what we expect to happen here. A map of CDMA coverage as it exists today. You'll note on the left, this is an amalgamation of really all the CDMA carriers that are out there. We have service on approximately 52 different providers. I think you're aware we don't have a dedicated provider in the sense of we only use a single CDMA network, or GSM for that matter. We have access to multiple networks. But Verizon in particular is a pretty important part of the CDMA picture. And once Verizon fully sunsets or turns down its network, you see we have some pretty significant gaps, particularly in the western U.S., the upper Midwest, and some areas in the Mid-South as well. What would happen to your devices in these states is they would continue to operate and gather data, but if you were to enter one of the zones where CDMA has been turned down, you would be unable to communicate. So we think of the picture on the right as a sunrise or a sunset. It could be both, but it really presents an opportunity, not only for us, but for our fleets and potential customers to ensure that they are on the most current networks or have a path to get there. So if your fleet has any 2G or 3G powered equipment, CDMA or GSM, you will see coverage degradation before networks are shut off for good. Again, thinking of that map that doesn't change, but with capacity greatly reduced. Fleets should have a path to upgrade legacy hardware to LTE powered equipment as quickly as they can. Again, we don't want customers or potential customers or others in a position where their devices are unable to communicate, unable to accept a load, or increasingly drivers perhaps having issues with ELD or compliance. It's so important to discuss your hardware options with your provider today, whether it's us or someone else, so you can use this upgrade to your advantage. Again, as we move to higher capacity, lower latency networks, we enable new features and benefits that were previously unavailable on non-LTE equipment. So we're suggesting some things to consider and questions to ask when you're upgrading your in-cab technology. So of course we want to know, what is the most advanced network currently available through your solution? What is being offered right now? Do the devices provide a seamless experience across North America? This is very important, particularly with trade between the US and Canada. You need a solution that is functional over the border with a complete experience across North America. So you wouldn't want service interrupted if you were to roam into Canada or into Mexico, and we currently provide a complete seamless experience across North America. So no boundaries from that perspective. Does the provider provide a fully managed and monitored solution? And this is really understanding the performance of the network at any given time. You know, as simple as how many calls are currently being accepted. How are those calls being handled? Are they successful? And even more detailed, if they are in a failing state, what is the nature of the failure and what activity can be taken to correct it? Do you offer critical back office systems and platforms? Are integrations available? Are there partners available that can help you manage your fleet and increase the performance? Is there a continuous hardware upgrade path? Is there a foresight within the organization, within your provider, to understand where technology is going? And is there a continuous path to move you in that direction? And are you engaged with wireless carriers to evolve solutions? This is really a management question, right? You're asking your provider how engaged they are with the Verizons, the AT&Ts, the T-Mobiles of the world. How embedded are they, so that we are carrying, you know, the message of coverage, the requirements that are needed to serve our customers and serve the industry. How engaged are you with those providers? You know, we, over time, Trimble Transportation has become a very trusted source within the industry. Because of our advanced alerting and monitoring, we are often slightly ahead of the carriers when there are issues on the network. So that's very important, so that we are working with our customers, with the carrier partners, continuously to understand the performance of the network. We partner with them during maintenance and upgrades events so that we can let them know if our customers are still communicating. So it's important to understand how engaged they are, not only with the carriers, but the industry as a whole. So we've had a long-standing path, a proactive path here to manage network sunsets. We first introduced an LTE device in 2017. In fact, I believe we were one of the first on a broad scale to have an LTE offering. We have a wide range of in-cab display and vehicle options that take advantage of LTE to enable all those customized solutions and fleet-specific needs and integrations that you may have. And we continue to work with our customers to upgrade and experience the benefits of LTE in advance of the network sunsets. So let's just talk a bit about LTE. It's always about increased bandwidth and speed. We won't get back into the analog stage. We do have a graphic coming up talking about speeds over time, but LTE networks are generally 10 times faster than older CDMA and GSM networks. Now that may mean faster logins and better connectivity, as well as giving fleets a more effective and faster way to distribute large files like training videos across a driver base, offering a hotspot, for instance, and the ability to support advanced solutions. So messaging and logins and such occur very much faster. And then we also have the ability of offering training videos and others that become even more important with our current stage with COVID. The LTE coverage is vastly higher than anything we've seen before on 2 or 3G networks. Some of you might not be aware, but Trimble Transportation supports a satellite service through a partner, Iridium. And when we began to do some initial analysis of LTE coverage, we took a look at locations we would use Iridium because there was no terrestrial service, either 2 or 3G, available. What we found was about 95% of the time that we were out of cellular coverage and using Iridium on a 2 and 3G network, we were actually in LTE coverage. So for customers that had relied on satellite through Iridium, oil field and such, mining and minerals, many of those did not need that connectivity through Iridium once we enabled LTE. So if we were to jump back a few screens, which I won't do at the moment, but you see in this map, for instance, the western U.S. is much highly covered. Most of those zones that are not covered, the white zones, are some sort of Bureau of Land Management, national parks, some sort of preserved Native American reservations, for instance, areas that are not licensed for cellular service. So LTE is going to be a long-lived solution. We expect LTE to continue in existence to at least 2030. The reason they'll support that in advance of 5G is 5G, as we'll get to in a moment, really supports a different model. But by moving your fleet to LTE, you're giving your drivers and vehicles coverage that is built to last. If we were to look at our previous generations of technology, we've seen anywhere from 8 to 10 years of network connectivity on the technology. With LTE, with our launch in 2017, we expect that functionality in place to at least 2030, so a 13-year solution. If we think of our handsets and how we're all anxious to get the latest and greatest of a handset, that is in stark contrast to about the 6 to 9 month turnover you might see in a consumer handset versus a solution here with LTE that could last for as long as 13 years. None of us can escape the talk about 5G and what's driving it. So 5G will support even more advanced services, but extreme reliability with near universal coverage. Really what's happening here in the initial launch of 5G is the cellular carrier partners are offering a high-speed mobile broadband experience. So in effect, they're not only trying to assume customers that are traditionally cellular customers and steal competitors' customers, but they're also looking to address the wired broadband market in your home or office. So all of those will eventually move to a 5G network with wireless connectivity. Again, the idea that there's near universal coverage on a device with 5G in a broadband experience. So higher data rates, low latency, full throughput, support for high demand video applications, but it also ushers in all of the promise of virtual reality, autonomous and connected vehicles as well. So standards were finalized generally last year in 2019, and again, based on the advertising and the push you see with 5G phone launches, large-scale deployments have started in this year. Coverage at the moment is generally limited to metropolitan areas, although you may see some advertising that contradicts that at the moment. One thing we've always worked on here at Trimble Transportation is the idea that coverage is king. So with we can have the greatest applications, bulletproof hardware, great partner integrations and customer applications as well, but if coverage doesn't exist, it's all for naught. So we'll continue to watch 5G and look for a launch point. Just a moment here on the vastly higher throughput and lower latency of systems. Just a quick graphic. We did actually offer an analog device some years ago with relatively low dial-up speeds, so roughly 300 bits per second. LTE increased that to 300,000 bits per second. 5G target has been a gigabyte per second, and I've seen some trials occur where they're getting up to 5 gigs per second throughput. So vastly higher speed and the ability to manage fleets in a better way. So when will 5G be that game changer? Well, eventually. We're unlikely to see it adopted broadly in transportation for several years. You shouldn't wait for 5G. 2 and 3G network sunsets will occur well before 5G is viable. But we anticipate, thinking again about my statement about coverage is king, we really anticipate broad coverage sometime in 2022. Again, that's always the base for us. What coverage is available? How can we use the applications and leverage the network? So a summary there. So of course, wireless carriers are repurposing the older networks. It's all due to capacity on the networks and the ability to offer higher speed 4G and increasingly 5G. The in-cab equipment that supports those older networks will soon see coverage degrade and eventually disappear. One of the reports and tracking we do is we do look at every market or system we have activity on each week. That's about 400 different markets. And we look at the call counts, we look at success, and so we really have our pulse on how successful networks are being. One thing the carriers do have in mind, though, is continuing to service those customers. So far, they've done a good job of reducing the overlapping cell sites and managing cell capacity in a way that, at this point, we have not seen a large degradation in service and quality. Although we'll continue to alert there and let folks know when we do see that. Again, 5G networks will be a game changer, but it's not going to happen right away for transportation. On the consumer side, there's a lot of buzz about it to get that out there. Again, they want to capture initially the mobile, the wired broadband market with mobile, but that won't happen for transportation right away. And of course, you know how to get in contact with us to learn more about prepping your fleet for 2 and 3G network sunsets. All right. I hope I've done a good job of covering what is happening here. Always open for questions and chat, and so please, if you have anything you'd like to ask now or in a follow-up, we're open for that.
Thanks, John. As John said, we have a lot of time here for questions, and we know that many of you may have questions, so feel free to use that chat question box right now. Send them in, and I will relay them to John, and he will get you some fantastic answers. So let's see what we've got going right now.
Sure. I might see one there. Go ahead, Brandon.
Yep, we're starting to get some questions come through. So I think the first question here, John, is what is the timetable for major carriers to sunset 3G networks?
Yep, no, great question there. So, in some ways, they don't want to give you a down date. When the sunset process we described, capacity reduced and so forth, but when will they actually shut down? Our current guidance is January 1st, 2022. Again, we can't speak to what the coverage and connectivity might look like before that. We're highly engaged with them. We have some great internal reporting, but the date we understand right now is January 1st, 2022.
Perfect. We've got another question that came through. The question is, can older CDMA and WinCE units be simplified to keep working on these expanded LTE networks?
So really what's driving the capacity or the capabilities of the device is the modem that's embedded in it. And there currently is not a path to upgrade the modem remotely. So we couldn't take a GSM or a CDMA modem, for instance, and make it LTE capable. No, there is not a path to remotely or without some sort of hardware change or swap to continue to have connectivity on those older devices.
There are some other benefits to upgrading those, right, John?
Well, sure. From a capacity, from a capabilities perspective, of course, you think of the graphic about the speeds that we have available. Logins take longer. Messaging will not be quite as fast. And you really limit the ability of the training videos, those things that kind of make the device more efficient and make your operation more efficient. For instance, the hotspot or the backseat data offering we have is not functional over non-LTE devices. So think of it if you had a custom integration a customer might have, or thinking about that you want to use the device to connect through. That would not be possible on an older 2 or 3G device, but is fully possible on an LTE device, meaning we can give you a path for custom integrations and applications on an LTE device that we cannot on a CDMA or GSM device.
Looks like we have some more questions here for you, John. Along the lines of the older CDMA and WinCE devices, are you aware of a buyback for these non-compliant units?
I am aware, and I'm not sure if Jake might pop in here as well, but we talked a bit about these types of questions. There is a path within Trimble to upgrade here, and I would suggest contacting your CM. We can get you more information about that post-call as well. CM, sorry to use the abbreviation, customer manager, so that we can see what's available for your fleet. We're highly engaged there. I know the business overall has looked at every customer and device and has developed a path to get folks upgraded. So that is in place, although I don't have the details by specific customer in front of me.
Perfect. Well, I'll make sure that we get everybody in attendance today connected with the right people after the call. So looks like another question we've got is how immediate will the impact of the CDMA units, the sunset starting in January? What are we anticipating seeing here come January 2021?
In that era, I expect capacity to be reduced. Again, the carriers have done a great job of presenting a map that is static and doesn't change, but we know the capacity has been reduced. Now, to this date, to this point, they've done a really great job of managing a process they call harvesting, right? Removing the coverage they can and moving it to LTE and 5G, while still being cognizant of the customers in the field that are dependent on CDMA and GSM. Our focus here is talking about transportation and in the mobile environment, but there are a high number of in-home alarms and monitoring systems, as an example, that are static and don't move, and those are supported by those carriers as well. So there's not an expectation that before January 1st, 2022, we see any large-scale geographies drop or diminish in coverage. Again, because we're not the only anchor out there, if you will, and there are some very critical elements that are transmitting data over CDMA and GSM networks that need to be supported as well. So no expectation of a mass dropout in January 1st of 2021. If we look at the year and a half or so since we know carriers have done some significant, in their terms, harvesting, again, we feel good about the way they've managed it to this point. And again, they have other customers they're serving as well, and they certainly want to continue to keep them on network, and they're also generating revenue for those older networks as well.
Right. How do you see the sunsetting of these networks kind of impacting things like the upcoming Canadian ELD mandate?
Good call. So in Canada, CDMA sunset about a year and a half ago. It was April of 2019. So the legacy devices are only communicating on GSM there. The GSM network in Canada will have a bit more long life. I don't anticipate any issues with ELD communicating over GSM. It's a relatively higher speed communications path, so I wouldn't anticipate any connectivity, cellular connectivity issues to impact the ELD rollout in Canada.
Terrific. Well, it looks like that's all of the questions that have come in so far. I'm going to give everybody a kind of a quick opportunity here to ask any final questions that we might have before we wrap up. So let's wait about 15 or 20 seconds, see if we can get any additional questions from the audience. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for attending. I want to thank John for presenting and being such a thought leader on this topic. As we said at the beginning, expect this presentation to be emailed to you tomorrow, and I will do my best to connect those of you with your service managers and make sure that anything in terms of an upgrade plan is put in place and notified for you. So thanks everyone. I appreciate your attendance today, and have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thank you everyone. Appreciate the time as well.